So we see we've got somebody from, Paul is here from Ireland.
Cool.
And if anybody's signed in from other places around the world other than the UK, let us know. Spain. Jacopo. Dusan from Slovakia. Excellent. Whoa. Lord from Tahoe. Is that Tahoe or Tahoe, California? Pascal, he's French, but he's in the UK. Tahoe, thanks, Lord. Not too far.
Devon's in Cape Town. Nice. What time is it there?
Oh, Devon's in Cape Town. Okay, cool. So I have to ask, are you actually based in Truckee when you're not in Mexico?
Yeah, yes, I moved my company out there, my startup, which is also made up of some of my best friends, out to Truckee. Actually, we moved up into Donner, which is above Truckee, when we saw everything happening with COVID, and it was the best move we ever made.
Okay, has Truckee changed much in the last 40 years?
You know, it changed a lot in the last year, for sure.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's not quite the same right now with all the masks and everything, but I think it's still got a lot of that same feel it's had, which I think has a lot of that sort of frontier spirit. You know, people who came out there actually on wagons years ago, many of them, their generations still live there. And it's kind of a place that you have to be a little rugged because of the snow. So it attracts a certain kind of people. And I think it's a great place to go in general.
Well, I mean, last time I was in Truckee was 1974. And it was pretty rugged and it was a frontier town. It felt like a frontier town.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have ever imagined moving a business like yours into a town like Truckee, but
yeah, why not? You know, it's most of my developers are in around the world in other places. It's funny, my one developer, I never even spoke to him verbally or saw him until we spoke in a world that we made for our product. So, okay, cool. New ways of working. Nice.
Right, I think we're going to get started, guys. We're almost at about 50 people in the room now.
That sounds great.
Fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce James Andrew, who's CEO and Technical Director of Global Liquidity, which I'm going to let him tell you about. He's also moderates James Crypto Treehouse, which is a Telegram group?
Telegram group, yeah.
Telegram group.
4 years now or more.
And he's going to be talking on the subject of Bitcoin Lightning subnets and the future of decentralized cloud computing. So this is probably one of the more technical events we've had, but I know I'm really looking forward to it. I think a lot of people are, given the reception we've had tonight. So what I would ask everybody is to any questions you have, at least initially, put them into the chat, and Caitlin and I will get them out to James. And if it's appropriate at some point, we may just open it up, unmute everybody, and let you interact directly with James. And we'll see how that goes. So James, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Larry. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Everyone got that? You see my title page there?
Okay.
Awesome. So Bitcoin Lightning subnets in the future of decentralized cloud computing, or why PlebNet matters. And I'll get to what PlebNet is in a little while. Some people may already know. So this whole talk is something that's very much in its formative stages in terms of the ideas that I'm presenting here. I've never presented them anywhere but on Clubhouse, for instance, where I talk about these things, but it's just a thing that I've been forming over the last about 6 months based upon what I've been seeing happening largely on Clubhouse and with the Bitcoin Lightning Network, and seeing where this necessarily is going to go. And so this talk is something like those papers they used to give, or they still do, around the creation of the internet. It was called an RFC. Like every major internet protocol had an RFC, and it stands for request for comments. It's when someone says, hey, here's a thing I think we should do. I'm requesting comments from the community. So this is very much a thing I crave interaction on, and other people's ideas, because this is it's being formed now. So the idea is tonight we're not really going to talk so much about Bitcoin as money, but I just want to briefly go over my view of what Bitcoin is, because I think it's really important to understand what Bitcoin is, to understand how these things will flow from the existence of Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, which is a layer on top of Bitcoin. So the first idea is that I believe that money is information and always has been. Back even in some early cultures, they would mark stones with marks on the stones that would represent transactions. And what was that? A ledger, right? And I would even propose that that gold essentially is really, in a way, a sort of ledger that records the weight of the gold. There's this weight of gold that you transfer, and it's a unit of information in a way. And so Bitcoin, in a way, is digital money in that form. It's money in the realm of information, money that is new technology for money. And it's significant that it is borderless, meaning it is not the product of any one country. In fact, even if you go and look up the definition of currency, and I think it's Investopedia, it's the one that just comes up if you type currency definition in Google. It says the system of money in use in a particular country. So right there, you can see that Bitcoin just doesn't fit the definition. And some people will say, oh, it's not currency then because it doesn't fit the definition. And what I'm pointing out here is I think we need to extend our definition of what money is, because Bitcoin is new technology for money. And it's algorithmically trustworthy. And that is unlike our fiat money, which can be manipulated according to the desires of third parties, of people and committees. No one can do that with Bitcoin because it's baked into the algorithm. And this has been running for 12 plus years now. And it is proven to be secure and reliable and trustworthy, that it will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. And this makes for good, sound money of a new type. It's also censorship resistant to a point. Bitcoin is hard to stop, and it's hard to shut down. So these are some characteristics that I think a lot of us would agree that we think is good about Bitcoin. And I like to say it this way, that gold is to atoms as Bitcoin is to bits. And this is just a little clip from a paper I wrote on called The Intrinsic Value of Bitcoin on a Medium post. And here's what I'm saying here. The information in gold is stored as a known quantity of atoms in a given unit of value. The information in a Bitcoin is stored in bits. These bits are the record of the set of computations which first unearthed this particular Bitcoin. These bits are likewise the record of transfers which have taken place since it was mined. The provable digital scarcity of this information is the key technological innovation which has made Bitcoin viable. Because of this provable digital scarcity, we are now able to realize a new form of money which exists purely in the digital sphere. This is a very important concept, and I'm really glad it exists. Now, check this out. We're going to shift gears here away from just the talking about Bitcoin as money and look into how Bitcoin is implemented, because this is relevant for the topic of this talk, which is how I see that Bitcoin through the Lightning Network will essentially lead to a new form of what I call decentralized cloud computing. So we normally talk about Bitcoin as a layer one protocol. People talk about Bitcoin as a layer one blockchain. And I think that's a really good use of the term, because then there's this thing called a layer two network, which goes on top of it, which is what Bitcoin Lightning is. But really, Bitcoin is actually, in the vernacular of computer networking that has been being developed for many years, it's a layer 7 protocol. I'm not saying we should change the name to a layer 7 protocol from layer 1, but we should recognize that that layer 1 protocol is actually sitting on this whole stack of layers that we're using right now in this meeting in major ways. I mean, think about what's going on right now, that my voice and image and desktop is being transferred to Ireland and to Tahoe and here from Cozumel. Well, there's a lot that goes on that we don't think about anymore. Those of us that were born, many of us born in the era of cloud computing. All of this stuff exists on a stack of layers. And down at the bottom, you've got the physical layer, which is your hardware, your network hardware, your Wi-Fi card, things like that. And then you're going up the stack, and at each one of these slices, there are companies and products and technologies, whether hardware or software, that are used to make these things work. For instance, we use TCP/IP every day. We say that word if we're in tech at all. And there's a slash in that word, TCP/IP. And that's because TCP and IP are on different layers. And when you go all the way up to the top, you've got your hardware at the bottom, you got your TCP IP moving data around, and then you got your operating system. And up on top of this, what do you have? Applications like Zoom, right? Applications like any application that we use, Instagram, right? These are all applications that are up on, that use this layer 7, or you might call them layer 7 applications. That's the application layer. Now, what's really interesting is that Bitcoin also is up here at the top in the application layer. So Bitcoin is an application. And we have to remember that Bitcoin is a particular type of technology. It's not just some made up thing that has no particulars to it. As an engineering construct, it is a piece of software that exists up here at layer 7. So this brings us to the idea of Bitcoin as a network. And so we're just talking about applications. Well, there's different types of applications that exist up here on layer 7. We've got the applications we run on our computer, whatever it is that we're working on at the time. But we also have applications like Zoom here, which operate in some level as a network because we're connecting our computers together in some way to have this experience. And so Bitcoin is a network, and it is a particular kind of a network called a peer-to-peer network. Some of this, I know a lot of people here know what this means, but I'm going to go over it because it's important and really relevant to where we go from here. So Bitcoin's network operates on the public internet first. It is peer-to-peer. And what that means is there's no central Bitcoin company or Bitcoin server, anything like that. There are simply nodes which are either mining Bitcoin or nodes which are not mining Bitcoin, but they're running their own node to process transactions. And this is at the layer 1, and there's thousands and thousands of these all over the world today. And it's also important, I think kind of important today to bring up that it's not heavily dependent even on the DNS system, that is the name lookup system and all that stuff that happened. Remember all that stuff that happened 2 weeks ago when Facebook and Instagram and Messenger and WhatsApp all just were gone? That was a DNS problem. The way that Bitcoin works, it's not going to go down because of that. It's going to work around these sorts of things. So it's more resilient than a lot of these other networks that we rely on. And particularly relevant is it has a financially incentivized uptime. And that is a thing that we never really had before in other peer-to-peer networks, because there was no way of transmitting money to a node on the network. Everything was done on sort of a volunteer basis. So people did it because they would share movies because they want to get movies, this sort of a thing. But now in Bitcoin, there's actually financial incentives for the network to move on because the miners want that Bitcoin. And so they're motivated to keep this thing going. So I want to focus on this idea of Bitcoin being a peer-to-peer network right now for a minute and bring it back to something that a lot of us probably may have some understanding of, depending on when we were born. And that was I muted here? Okay. I saw it. Well, I saw what happened. So peer-to-peer file sharing, we're good, right? At this point. So peer-to-peer file sharing from Napster to BitTorrent. So one of the first applications, or really the first application to the public anyway, of a peer-to-peer network was for sharing files. And people probably remember, a lot of you probably remember Napster was this famous site that you could download MP3s from. And this was so exciting at the time to certain people. And in a way, it was peer-to-peer. That is, people were actually sharing files between and among their computers, but it had a centralized index and it was able to be shut down by a court order. And so right after that, when Napster just went away, we had the rise of these, what you might call true peer-to-peer file sharing networks. There was all these ones called Emule, Nutella, Kazaa, LimeWire, and then they pretty much all went away and we got BitTorrent. And BitTorrent was superior because BitTorrent implemented something a little bit like the consensus algorithm that Bitcoin has. Not to say the algorithms are similar, but it has some form of what you might call a consensus algorithm, because in BitTorrent, files are shared by individual participants getting the file and then continuing to share it. So the idea that there are hundreds of people sharing a particular, let's say, movie, gives some sense of reliability that it probably is that legitimate movie and not something with a virus. Not to say that it always works that way, but there's some level of reliability there. And in a way, if you look at it in a very real sense, BitTorrent is a form of cloud storage, meaning you're storing files. There are files being stored not on your computer that can be brought to your computer, and you're not using Amazon for that. You are using this decentralized network of peers. So there's already been this sort of foray into what you might call decentralized cloud computing, because part of cloud computing is storing files in BitTorrent for many years now. It's been around since 2009. Now, if you look at BitTorrent today, it's pretty wild here that it is currently, let me put it this way, as of 2009, it was responsible for between 43 and 70% of all internet traffic at one point. A lot of people don't realize this. And now it's much lower because the companies, generally the big media companies, have provided all these streaming services largely as a capitulation to the fact that they couldn't stop BitTorrent, so they had to do it. But still today, or as of 2019, BitTorrent is responsible for 27.5% of all upstream traffic on the internet. So this is a really big deal on the internet, and it's a peer-to-peer protocol. So the reason I want to talk about that here is because now we're going to talk about the Lightning Network, which is another peer-to-peer protocol on top of the peer-to-peer protocol that is Bitcoin. So already we have the Bitcoin network, which manifests a lot of those same features as the Lightning Net, as the file sharing networks, as BitTorrent in particular. But now we have this thing called the Lightning Network, which is a new use of this peer-to-peer technology that's called a layer 2 network on top of Bitcoin. One analogy, just a real, not technically accurate, but a way to think about it. In the current financial system, we have this system that's at the lower levels of our financial system called FedWire. When you're wiring money, or when banks are moving money back and forth, it's for moving big blocks of money, and it's slow and it's expensive. But then we have above it Visa and MasterCard that we can use our cards all over, and essentially those companies are settling with those with transactions on the slower network. So in a way, you could think of Lightning as a network upon which Visa, MasterCard type transactions can happen in a decentralized form. And it has a lot of great features to it right now that it has the capacity to scale to many, many transactions per second. And there has been a lot of, there's been a whole lot of progress in it. I'll get to that in a minute. So it's also a much lower cost. So you can right now with Lightning send Bitcoin to someone. You can send just 100 sats or 100 millionths of a Bitcoin. So it's possible to send fractions of a Bitcoin around the world instantly now with this Lightning network. Ultimately, these are bidirectional payment channels. That's the way that it works. It is Bitcoin. Two nodes will link up in the Lightning network, and you have to actually stake Bitcoin in the channel. So if you put one Bitcoin down and the other node puts one Bitcoin down, then what happens is neither of you can spend those Bitcoins, but as long as you have those Bitcoins locked, your nodes are able to transact back and forth up to one Bitcoin almost instantly, as many times as you want. And so this is a really a powerful thing, and it's really been growing a whole lot. There's a recent article in this was in CoinDesk, I think. Nodes on Bitcoin's Lightning Network double in 3 months, and this was recent as of July. And I looked now at the current stats, and it's actually exploded even more since then. And there's right now almost pushing $200 billion US locked up in this network of nodes. Now, here's where we get to this thing called PlebNet and how I see this cloud computing coming about. So there's this thing that you can get right now called an Umbrel node, and that is anyone can go get this thing called an Umbrel node. And in fact, you can even get this little box now that they will ship you, and you can build it for even cheaper if you want to do it as a hobby. But it's this little box. Think of it almost like a little Wi-Fi router for Bitcoin though. It's not a Wi-Fi router, but I mean like a device that you just put on your network. And now what happens is you now have, when you get the Umbrel node, they have done this beautiful job of packaging it all up so that without being super technical, you get your full Bitcoin Lightning node, like your own node and your own wallet, a Bitcoin node and a Lightning node, and a really beautiful interface for it that makes it feel really accessible. And now also there's a lot more things that you can do with this already in this Umbro node. And so what's happened is I've been spending a decent amount of time on Clubhouse over the last 9 months, because a lot of like the Bitcoin sort of thought leadership happens there. And one of the cool things I've seen that's come out of it is this. It's called PlebNet. And let me zoom into it a little bit. There we go. So what this is a network of real people, generally that know one another. I have a node in there somewhere. I know a lot of these people. I won't call their names out right now, but these are people that are known people, are known on Clubhouse, that have been making groups and saying, you know what, let's connect our Umbro nodes together. Remember how I was saying how you have to establish a channel to do a transaction? So what this graph is showing is the actual network of known individuals that have gotten Umbro, installed it, and then have talked together on Clubhouse and Telegram and Discord in order to swap the information necessary to link their nodes and to put Bitcoin down on this connection. And what you end up with is there's over 1,000 nodes in here. And I'm sorry if I've got the number low for the people that know PlebNet better. This was recently. And 1,000 nodes that are all now connected in a way such that they are cooperating in terms of routing transactions. I didn't get to that yet. That the way that Lightning works is when you run a Lightning node, you can set a rate at which you will process transactions. So if you have 1/10 of a Bitcoin there, or I think the average node size is up to a Bitcoin now in here, I heard, but I'm not sure about that, but I know some people have multiple Bitcoins in these nodes. And you become sort of like almost like a utility plant, and you can like an energy plant, and you can charge for routing transactions through your node. And if you're just a lone individual and you set up your node, there's only so much you can do with that because who you're connected to. But when you're connected to PlebNet, the members of PlebNet have figured out how to work things out such that being in PlebNet is actually advantageous both to you as an individual financially and to the members of the network. And so what I see here is a really important new construct. It's almost like got the formation of something like a next generation decentralized investment bank. You know, what is Goldman Sachs but a group of people that work together for their own interests? And now you've got a bunch of nodes working together for their own interests. And the way that right now that is limited to earning money by routing transactions. So this is essentially a liquidity network. But what I see here is influenced a lot by what I see on this slide. And this is the App Store for Umbro. What this is Umbro now is providing more and more apps, which are a little bit different than regular apps, because everyone needs to install the app on their own Umbro server, and then that installation alone will allow that app to connect with the others. So these are peer-to-peer apps. And look at the kind of things you can do here. There's a thing called Nextcloud. It's like a Google Docs type of a thing, which is more decentralized and doesn't rely on Google. And you also have things like down at the bottom, you see there like Sphinx Relay. That is a chat protocol that exists on the Lightning Network. So, okay, we've got storage, and people are starting to do some things with storage here. And there's also a lot of apps for managing your Lightning network. And so what I see here in this app store is really a new model for computation. But what I think is really interesting is that if you combine that with this sort of a setup where you have a collection of nodes that know one another and that have a reputation in the system, what you've got here is the basis for a decentralized cloud computing system. And the reason, and this is where it gets a little bit technical, but I just want to go over it a little bit. I came across this paper recently called Bayesian Network-Based Trust Model, and this is from 2003, and it wasn't about Bitcoin, but it's a paper all about how if you have a network of nodes, how that trust can be gained in that network in this way called Bayesian, which means that trust is built up over time as the nodes interact. That's all it really means. And it says this here, it says, most current applications and experiments on trust and reputation only focus on one of them, either trust or reputation, although the idea of combining them together in one system has been well known in the literature. An agent broadly builds two kinds of trust in another agent. One is the trust in another agent's competence in providing services. The other is the trust in another agent's reliability in providing recommendations about other agents. Here, the reliability includes two aspects: whether the agent is truthful in telling its information and whether the agent is trustworthy or not. Now, what I propose, and this is the RFC sort of a thing, this is something I think is a good idea to explore, and is that if we apply this Bayesian network-based trust model to a system of nodes like we have in PlebNet, and this hasn't been done yet. This is where we're getting to the realm of, like, I'm hoping some people will take me up and just start working on this, because I'm really busy with my own startup. I don't have time to code all of this. But if you can put a system whereby these, let me back up for a minute. We already have, I would propose, a system of some trust here. Why? Because what you're seeing in this graph are connections that people that I know, many of them in real life, have with each other. That is what you might call an ongoing financial transaction, because you've got Bitcoin locked up, the other node has Bitcoin locked up. What do I know? I know that you both hold each other in high enough regard as to say, I'm going to do business with you. And if I look at this whole network, and if I zoom out at it, you can see all the nodes on the outside. What I know is that all these nodes are behaving honorably as good actors so far, and I can even see how long these connections have been up in the realm of routing financial transactions. And so what I see here is already we have this system whereby you can see why someone might not want to start being a bad actor here. Because what's going to happen if, I'm not going to call out a name, but I could call out the name, starts tampering with the code and trying to rip someone off in some way or to behave badly, well, that would just get reported around the network, and everyone who has connections to that node would immediately shut them off because they would not want to be associated with that person who was ripping other people off. So you see, because there's a system already of some reputation here, you've got a system whereby there's some amount of trust I can put in this system as being a system of good actors. And so that's what led me to this idea of the Bayesian trust model, where I say, if we can implement a protocol on Lightning whereby nodes can report one to another officially in the protocol regarding the trustworthiness and reliability of each node they're connected to, what I see you have here is the basis for a system upon which all sorts of cloud computing type applications can be run. And I think this is very important for those of us that value a future that has Bitcoin at its core, you might say, in terms of finance, is that we are way too reliant these days on these centralized cloud providers like Amazon and like Google. And it's not so simple as just getting a computer and putting it in your own house anymore as an alternative, because they're providing all sorts of global footprint services involving routing of video and audio and all sorts of other things. It's not just storage. And I believe that the Bitcoin community needs to focus even more on figuring out how to replace this. And so what I see here in the Bitcoin Lightning subnets like PlebNet is an infrastructure on which I think these services could be built. So I'm wrapping it up here really quickly, but the basic idea is that imagine having a system whereby you could run a node, and instead of simply just earning Satoshis for routing transactions, maybe you could go plug in a bank of hard drives and earn Satoshis for storing content, or earn Satoshis for running a Docker container, a virtual machine. And you might say, well, that seems like, why would you trust people to why would you trust someone to run your code for you, like your web server? Well, I wouldn't trust a stranger, but I might trust someone in a network like this that has been a node of good standing for a long time. And so what I see here that's very promising is this connection of nodes in Lightning, I see as potential alternative infrastructure upon which even we will build the metaverse. And I think it's really important that it exists, because the alternative is that we just run all of our lives in Google servers and Amazon servers and Facebook servers. And I don't think that's good for anyone. And that's all I've got for now.
Brilliant, James. Thank you for that.
Yep.
All right, that's a lot there. I would love to take some questions.
Yeah, so we've had, I can see a couple. There was Jacopo who said, Bitcoin like a torrent framework. Yes, I indeed agree. Now music and movies have quickly passed from peer-to-peer to services like Spotify and Netflix. Do you think that the big techs and governments can do something similar with Bitcoin?
Do you mean, do I think that they will try to stop it? Was that the question? I missed the question there. What was the question particularly?
Do you think that
What's
big
the-
tech and governments will do something similar with Bitcoin? Jacopo, do you want to jump?
Yeah, similar as what?
Where's Jacopo? I'm gonna unmute
Hi.
him. There he is.
Yeah, like just
Yeah,
maybe in
so-
your own words. Like,
Yeah, sorry, James. Maybe I'm missing my point. I think that right now in the peer-to-peer world, we are seeing that I mean, people has passed pretty much quickly from sharing music and videos from their computers and using the peer-to-peer network and using, I mean, using these services offered by big techs. So to arrive at let's say something like a compromise. I mean, big techs they can't actually block peer-to-peer network, but they can invite more and more people to pay a monthly fee to join the infinite content. Let's say that it's the same that peer-to-peer network is offering. Okay, so
I think I understand the question. I don't foresee Amazon and cloud computing going away anytime soon. In fact, I even make use of it in my own business for certain things. But what I foresee is that there will be sort of almost a reboot of the internet that might be a little bit underground in a way. That it's more of like a thing that would be favored by even at first hobbyists and independent developers that want to experiment with this. I think it will start more like that. But I think then once the value is seen in it, I think it could be a thing that could even give them a run for their money in certain areas in terms of providing an alternative in terms of competition.
Yeah, actually, thanks for the explanation about Lightning Network. I am just starting now to get interested into this, and it was pretty much mind-blowing because actually, I got the point about the free cloud computing that you are presenting tonight. So yeah,
awesome. Well, I'd suggest if you're interested, go grab an Umbrel node and participate in it. It's one of the coolest things you can do as a hobbyist now. You know,
I just started my node with Umbrel the last week. So
nice.
Yeah, I am joining the community now, and
right on.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Good talking.
Yeah, I will keep going deeper with the Lightning stuff, and I leave space for the other questions.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Thanks for that. I was going to see Alexander Straub. Do you want to hop on? He was asking to dive a little bit deeper about how to code our node, reduce their transaction fees, the benefit of the Satoshis movement. Zero Satoshi.
Hey, you want to dive deeper? I'm all for it. What do you, in particularly, how to code our node as who? Like in what context? You want to talk?
Yeah, I mean, I have looked into the Umbrel, and I've tried to figure out how to set certain essentially transactions and find out what are actually good counterparties, because I've experimented a little bit, and I'm not so clear yet how I could find my best counterparties between the nodes. So there seems to be like some are connected to, they train out essentially your Satoshis, and then they disappear. If you look at my node on Ambers, it's called Winfinity Xul Energy node. I shared it.
Yeah.
And you see that actually after a certain while, actually certain actors, essentially, you open like 5 million Satoshi nodes. They just, they train you from one side and then they disappear.
Well, let me ask you, are you in PlebNet, or is this just, where are these nodes? Is this part of PlebNet or something else?
Part of what?
I'm saying, I think that this thing called PlebNet, which I showed, which is a group of people that know one another and that act as a network and have a community, might help with this, because I think that people there are a lot more incentivized to keep their nodes up. If you look up PLEBNET, just Google it, you'll find that the Telegram group, and you can just ask there of how to participate in it. And it's a lot better than just dealing with random nodes out on the network.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's absolutely.
So that's the first thing I would suggest.
It's not random. I think the network was so small when I started about 120 days ago that you could actually email individuals and you make connections, like the Bitcoin Foundation of Hong Kong.
Yep. So see, this brings up a good point, Alexander. You bring up a good point that the thing I'm proposing that I would love to see built on top of this plebnet concept, this subnet concept, is a system whereby what you're talking about could be baked in. And so if somebody were to act badly, that they would be reported to the network, and that node would be less valuable on the network. People wouldn't want to connect to that node. So we need a system, a better system of reputation. Awesome.
Let me put on mute again because I'm sitting in the chicken joint and nothing alone for the dollar.
Okay, so we have a question here from Rob Atchison. How secure do you think a Docker container could be made on this network?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because one of the things, for anyone that doesn't know a Docker container, think of it almost like a little mini virtual machine computer that can run anywhere else. I like to think of it that when you put your code in a Docker container, it's like turning it into a Nintendo cartridge. And as long as there's a Nintendo around, you can plug it in and it will run. Nintendo being Docker, that's the app. And so it makes your code so that you can just install it anyway. So normally what you do with these is you use them in a system like Kubernetes, it's called, and you would generally run these on servers that are hosted by Amazon or Google, or some service that sits on top of them. In my business, I use Heroku, it's called, and we host Docker containers. And one of the things that we're trusting there is that that company is not going to modify my code or insert malicious software in it and cause my node to spit out something that will become part of a botnet or something. You know, I'm trusting they're not going to hack my code. They're going to run it as I expect. And so you bring up a good point that in a system like that we have now, the reason we trust them is that they're this big reputable, in some contexts, cloud computing provider, and that would get out if they started doing that. And so if we were going to run a system like this, there's a couple things that you can do. First off, I'm really intrigued by the application of IPFS, which is a file storage system similar to BitTorrent, to this problem, because with IPFS, you're able to put a Docker container out onto IPFS, which means that it's stored in a decentralized manner, and you get an identifier that will become invalid if anyone tampers with it. So that's one starting point that you can do. You can have some reliability that the code you put out is the code that they are tuning into to run. But see, this is why you need the reputation system. So I would want to have some recourse if somebody did act badly. And this is why we need the system that I'm proposing here, that would allow people to feel comfortable that someone will not tamper with the container. Now, there are other things that people are working on, called like homomorphic encryption. There's ways that people could actually run your code in a way where they can't even know what they're running. But even that has issues, because if they're running your code, they're going to want to know likewise that you're not running a malicious botnet in that Docker container, or going to use it to do some criminal thing, right? So it comes back to reputation. We need a system of reputation, and a system that inherently penalizes those that act badly in a way that would then be reported to the network, such that the protocol itself would cause bad actors to say, I'm not going to bother. Much like Bitcoin mining works in a way to ensure the mining of layer one.
And I think you just sort of answered another question that's come in that says, apart from reputational damage, is there any other penalty that a bad actor node will suffer if they, for example, corrupt the data content that they store?
Well, not yet, but this is what needs to be. This is the RFC part that I'm saying. This is a thing that I would love people to take a look at that paper and work on implementing such a model. And I even think it might be something almost like an NFT on Lightning that represents the identity of your node, meaning like a little contract that then could have other nodes staking on it, whether or not that you acted reliably or not. So you build up trust over time that way. So this is the thing, this is the borders of where we're at, and this needs to be developed, which is partly why I'm putting this out there.
So do you have a white paper for this?
I don't have a white paper, but what I do have, somebody is asking me down there for a link to the PDF. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the link right now to that Bayesian network-based trust model paper. There it is. And if you go there and just download the PDF, That's a really good, I think it's really cool when you take research from one area and bring it into another and make something new. I mean, that's what Satoshi did. And so I think that this is not a Bitcoin specific paper, but I think if people here will give this a read and then think how maybe to implement this on Lightning, and make it an app on Umbrel or a platform so that new apps can be built on that, that'd be awesome. So please get to that.
Brilliant. Okay, so hopefully that answers, because there's been a few mentions of whether or not there's a white paper for this. So brilliant. So from Mario, he asks if you have any thoughts on Akash.network.
I do actually. I think that Akash Network, let me pull it up here. So I actually had a Zoom with the founder. And what I think that they're doing is very interesting. I'm not sure exactly about their tokenomics at all, but the concept of Akash Network is that they are providing a decentralized marketplace for cloud computing resources, which may even be at centralized providers. So what that means is that conceptually, I like it, because what they're doing is they're saying if you have the need to do certain types of cloud computation, like you need to crunch data on your data model, certain types, it might not be applicable to like making a Zoom competitor or something like that, but you could submit essentially a bid to the network. So, and then a transaction could be made where you would essentially take delivery of those computing services. And conceptually, I like that, because if this were to succeed, it could create a fair marketplace with the cloud computing providers and force them to act not so much as like a monopoly compared to if there is this marketplace for cloud computing. In terms of the technical details of how it's implemented, I'm not super up on it, but I love the concept of what he's doing over there.
Great. Just a confirmation from Danette is asking, do the Umbrel nodes receive a reward for validating transactions?
Well, not particularly for validating transactions on Bitcoin, but what you will receive a reward for is if you configure your Lightning node, which is on the Umbrel node. You have a Bitcoin wallet and a Lightning wallet. If you set up your Lightning node using the software on the App Store, there's Thunder Hub and a few others that are specifically set up for configuring your node. And if you participate in PlebNet, I would say that I wouldn't even think of doing it without at least talking to everyone there and getting connected, because there's a whole community around it. You can earn by routing transactions. Now, I don't think anyone is making a lot of money doing this, but that fee market could change. I don't know that people know for sure that it won't change. I have heard about some people that have multiple Bitcoin making serious money. But right now, this isn't a thing that's going to really give you appreciable return so much, but there's a lot of other reasons why people are participating in the network. It's very early days.
So Paula asks, these nodes validate transactions, but don't store the ledger.
No, they do. That's what's beautiful about them. When you set up a Bitcoin Umbrel node, the first thing it does is it synchronizes with the Bitcoin blockchain. It actually shows it processing every block since the beginning. So depending on your network connection, this can even take a few days. And so I suggest you get an SSD and not an old-fashioned now they call them hard drive for it, because yeah, it stores the whole blockchain.
Perfect. How does PlebNet, this is Pascal asking,
yeah.
How does PlebNet differ from Blockstream, Async, or Lightning Lab?
Well, there's several things here. I'll tell you that these are all things that provide services or systems that have something to do with, I'm not particularly familiar with Async, but I know Blockstream and Lightning Labs. And Lightning Labs, in fact, provides some of the software that is used to configure your Lightning node, and also actually releases the software that Lightning runs on or is implemented in, called LND. So if you look at it this way, that Lightning is a specification, and there are several companies that have put budget into implementing and supporting that specification, even though it's still decentralized, Lightning Labs being one. And people in PlebNet are using Lightning Labs protocol I think in all cases, for being essentially customers of the network that are working together.
Got it. Okay, ADSSX asks, at the beginning, anyone could mine Bitcoin. Now it's only huge data centers. Will the same thing happen to node routing?
That's a very good question. I think probably yes. I think probably what I like to think of it as people that are mining or earning money on layer one. people that are routing transactions are earning money on layer 2. And I think progressively these things will be pushed more toward like industrial level scale, such that individuals can't really compete competitively. But I think that there's a lot more opportunity on these new layers of applications that are going to be built, which you might call layer 3 mining or layer 3 earning, where you're earning not because you're routing transactions, but because you have a unique service. Like, for instance, maybe you have a code that you've written that translates or enhances someone's writing real time using AI. And you want to actually do that work and deliver them the result, and they're paying you in Lightning for it. They might pay a lot more than routing transactions because you're running an application. So that's where I think this marketplace is going to come about, when you have people running all sorts of different applications in a decentralized manner with this similar model of being able to charge and consumers being able to bid and bid for these services.
I don't know, ADSXSX, if you wanted to unmute yourself, because they've said a few interesting things here, kind of going
I'm
down.
looking too.
Yeah.
Hi.
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 So yeah, I mean,
Async, another Lightning Lab, Lightning Labs competitor. Yes.
yeah, I mean, just like answering like when you talk about like async, but I mean, I'm not familiar particularly with async. I mean, I don't use it. I use like LND on my Lightning node.
Yeah, I know there's also C Lightning and others. I think it's all the same Lightning network though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're all like compatible between each other. I don't know if there's any others than these three. And yeah, because my other question was like regarding like the comparison between Bitcoin mining and node routing. Do you expect fees to go to 0 at some point, or like to decrease a lot on like the
it's hard to say what direction they're going to go. I'm not sure, because it's a free market in a way, and I'm not expert enough on the dynamics of it to see which way it's going to go. But I think ultimately it will go to industrial scale at some point. But like I say, I think there will be opportunities up at these other layers if we can just get to building the infrastructure needed to start seeing these applications happen.
Sure, thanks. It was a great talk. I mean, amazing idea to imagine network as like a cloud computing network.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Not so much a question, but a comment here from Max. Open source code plus reproducible deterministic builds could solve, or at least be a step towards solving, both the tampering and the transparency issues.
Oh yeah, if he wants to come up, great. I can talk about that. It's up to him or up to you. But yes, in fact,
if you want to unmute, feel free.
That's fine. Those here.
Yeah, no, just it was just a comment, just a little bow on top of what you already said.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great comment. And I think if you're interested in this direction, I think what you would look at IPFS, which I didn't get to talk about that, but it's IPFS is like BitTorrent for files. And there's a lot of people using it now. It's a decentralized file storage system. And you can even set up a Git repository for your code where it's not stored on github.com, but it's stored on IPFS by a collection of peers. So this is the kind of thing I'd love to see arise out of a system like Plebnet. Maybe Plebnet wants to write open source software. Well, all the nodes could host the IPFS content, pinning it, it's called, and therefore the Git repo would actually exist across all the nodes. And then when you build your code from that known repo and deploy the result to IPFS, you get a content identifier which can't be tampered with, or else the link won't work anymore. So I think you're definitely onto some really important ideas about the way you can be sure that the code you are running is actually what you want to be running in such a system.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, James. Question from Sina. You compared Lightning Network with Visa. How do you see the path towards Lightning being used by everyday consumers to replace like Visa, MasterCard?
That is an awesome question. I'm so glad that you asked that. Well, I'll tell you, it is the 18th right now. Less than a month from now, I'm flying down to El Salvador with my wife to actually give a similar talk to this. So Crypto Mondays hears it first. And we're going down to El Salvador as famously as the country that has adopted Bitcoin as currency. And there's a place there called El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach. I encourage you to YouTube it, Bitcoin Beach, and see some of the more recent ones, videos. And there are locals now who are, the government actually gave everyone in the town, and this like the people don't have a lot of money down there. I think that initially $30 of Bitcoin, and even the street vendors and people are actually using Bitcoin. And I think that there's mixed, how some people are, there's lines over, it's generally well received. Let's say this, it's generally well received and it's starting to take off down there. And I think that's very interesting. However, I think that the idea of using Lightning to pay for goods and services out here and buy coffee with it in America or in a lot of other places might not be the way it catches on. I think there's a lot more, like for instance, in my company, I make a game called Trade, which is a Bitcoin Lightning native game where you can cash in and out of the game with Bitcoin by scanning a QR code using Strike, much like how now you can tip on Twitter now with Bitcoin, with Lightning. So this just came out, what, 2 weeks ago, where now millions of people that have access to Twitter are now downloading Strike, with another app I think is awesome, that allows you to link a debit card and now you can send money across to anyone on Twitter. That's today. So that's some mass adoption already right there. So I think there's going to be a lot more use of it for purely digital transactions in the worlds of gaming. And also, I think that there's a lot of potential for business to business uses where companies will realize they can bill each other and they can create channels between their enterprises and among their enterprises and pay instantly for data feeds and things like this. So I think this is really going to explode in a lot of directions.
It's interesting because someone just messaged me saying that DeFi is fascinating as a digitally native product, but there's still too many bad actors. It will keep institutions away whilst there's so much distrust.
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's particularly the case, that institutions are even staying away. I think, I mean, the price of Bitcoin would say that that's probably not really happening. I mean, they're starting to get in even more, and the network marches on, whether it's by institutions or not. I mean, the Lightning Network is exploding in size. I mean, that in July, there was 80, it went up almost 50% in terms of capacity, even since in the last 3 months. So it's happening.
Oh, James, we lost you. Oh, you're back. What was, can you say the last thing you said?
You're muted, James.
He's not muted.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I think my webcam went down on my backup. So yeah, I'm saying it's already happening. It's already being adopted right now. I mean, with Twitter and with all these things happen, with the network growing almost 50% in the last 3 months, it's happening right now. So I'm not here saying looking at what's going to keep it from happening, because it is happening right now. The thing I'm talking about.
Okay, question from Paula. Paula, you may want to unmute yourself. You said there are tiny. How does scaling work? I'm not sure what.
Okay, how does scaling work? Well, I'll tell you right now that in terms of scaling, I should mention there's a lot of other services that are being built on top of Lightning for regular people and regular businesses. For instance, in my business, I use a system called OpenNode. It's a payment processor that uses Lightning. And right now, I'm able to accept or transmit up to 5 Bitcoins in a Lightning transaction, and it just works. So I don't know where the scaling problems are, because I'm not hitting them. I mean, I do transactions all day long. I've never even had one fail ever once. And it just works. In other words, a lot of these questions about scaling and the limits of Lightning have really been being addressed in the last 6 months by a lot of different individuals and companies.
Great. Question from Rob. Anyone looking at DAO concepts on Lightning?
I think the answer is people are looking at a lot of different things. I'm not sure. That would be an interesting idea, like decentralized autonomous organizations. I guess what I'm proposing is something like that, in that there's a trust system in a federated network of nodes. I would look at yeah, that's all I got to say for right now. But yes, that's sort of what I'm looking at doing here, or looking at hoping other people will do.
And then Alexander, nope, sorry. ADSSX is asking if you're going to San Salvador next month for the Lightning conference.
I am. I'm actually giving the keynote in the tech track there about this topic. So I'd love to see anyone down there.
There you go. Amazing. When you get a chance, Akin is asking if you can put the name of your game startup in the chat.
Sure. It's called trade, but I'll put it in there.
And there's a few of the people in the group that are attending the Lightning conference as well. So
Awesome.
you'll meet James, maybe.
That's awesome.
There's just some conversation going on basically about centralized banks, which I think we can all agree we're not for. Does anyone else have any other questions, or did I miss anybody? I think I've got everyone.
I just put our Discord for our game in the group. We're early beta, but I would love if everyone wants to try it. It's cool.
Brilliant. I think that's it for questions. Oh, Pascal, is OpenNode the same as BTC Pay?
No, actually, BTC Pay is something you can run on your Umbrel if you want to process your own Lightning transactions as a business. But then it's up to you to keep your channels open and to have the right amount of liquidity in them. And there's some issues with it. So what OpenNode is it's almost like a Shopify. It's like a web type service that they handle all of that for you, and you just integrate it into your app. You'll get QR codes that people scan, and it's that simple. It's really great. I love it.
So Paula is asking, how can these small servers hold the entire blockchain?
Yeah, it's because the blockchain, it's because, you do need a relatively large hard drive. I mean, you're going to want a terabyte hard drive in there, because I'm not sure exactly how big it is right now, but it's, I think, 600-700 gigabytes or something like this at this point. So the answer is you do need a decent amount of space. And the reason, and that's really a good question, that's at the heart of why the Bitcoin Cash fork didn't go over well in the community, because the whole idea of Bitcoin Cash was to increase the block size so that you would need larger blocks. And so you would need, it's 550 gigabytes, Alexander says. And so we have this block size that has kept Bitcoin at its core relatively small, so you can run it on small devices like this. So that's part of why it is that way.
Great. That is great stuff, James. I think that might be it.
This was awesome.
If nobody has any other questions, James, is there a way for people to contact you if they'd like?
Yeah, I mean, we've got. You know what I'll do? I'll put a link to my Telegram group in here. James's Crypto Treehouse, great way to talk to me. And James at globalliquidity.io is my email address. And yeah, Telegram, and also even a better way is I just posted the link to the Discord for the game that my company is making, and I'm in there talking to people about all this kind of stuff as well as the game. So the Discord is great.
That's brilliant.
Excellent.
Everyone's finding you now, and I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This is great.
I've been in the Treehouse since 2018, and it's a
nice,
brilliant group. Lots of great conversations. It's kind of my go-to for topics that are in the news and getting just some really interesting opinions on it. So yeah, I love the Treehouse. So,
awesome.
James, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here from Mexico.
All right, bye-bye. This is awesome. I guess I'm gonna log off. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Cool.
We'll see you in a month. Take care.
Okay,
Bye all.